Peace is not something you wish for, it's something you make, something you are, something you do, and something you give away.
Hmm.
That's by Robert Fulghum. And I thought that was very appropriate for what we're going to talk about today. We'll get to that in a minute. This is Looking Up. Welcome to the podcast, the weekly podcast that Kathy Pollard and I do. We're so glad that you joined us. We are grateful for everyone who tunes in and shares and likes. We just really like for people to like us, don't we? It's
Yes.
all about being liked. No, we like to, we just like to talk about things that we find important to Christian women. And we like to share our conversations, and we like to think that there's a lot of people joining in with us on our conversations. But we're glad that everyone has joined us today. We're going to talk about de-escalating conflict. We're going to try to talk about that. But first, we're going to catch up. It's not been all that long since we talked to each other. So there may not have been a whole lot of things that have happened over the weekend, but how's everything going there?
It's going good. I hate to be lame and start out with the weather again, but when you and I first started chatting before we hit record, it was so overcast and kind of, dreary. And almost as we are getting ready to record, the sun came out and everything brightened up. And
I can tell a difference.
yeah, it does. It
Nicely.
makes a huge difference with all that natural light coming in here. So I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, things are going good. We had all the kids over for Memorial Day, so we just grilled, hamburgers and hot dogs, kept it simple. But we played that game again, the Jibber Jabble game with all of us this time, and it was so fun. Even when we were slightly annoyed with each other for blowing the clues, and
Because
trying
y'all are
to
not
plead
competitive.
our case why it was a good clue or wasn't a good clue. It was a really fun game. So we played that again, and then Tuesday night we had ladies class over here. Had some really good discussion about personal weaknesses and
Mhm.
temptations and struggles and things like that. So it was good class. Good class.
Good.
Humbling.
Well, those are the best kinds that
Yeah.
we need.
Yeah, some very wise women in this group too. When, you be quiet and listen. And there's women of all different ages, and the things that they have to say, so many times in my mind, I'm going, wow, that was really, really good. That was exceptional advice,
You're still doing it round table style,
hmm
and everybody likes it, huh?
Seems to be going over well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that y'all do that. That's great. A great idea.
Thanks. I think we just stole it from the round table.
Well, but I guess I was thinking when you first started saying y'all were going to do that, I was imagining small tables of different like group talking things over in groups and then maybe all getting together and sharing what you'd come up with. But I
hmm
like that it's everyone is involved. How
hmm
many people do you normally have?
Well, we were kind of down this week because it's a holiday week and a
Uh-huh.
lot of our members are out of town, but I would say we had maybe 25 to 27 here Tuesday night. So, but a lot of our regulars were gone. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a lot anyway.
it's a good group. Yeah.
Well, we had a tornado warning on Memorial Day. I have
What?
never, yeah, it's our turn to go through those things. And as many
Oh.
years as we've lived in this area, I don't think I've ever been in a tornado warning. I mean, I've little tons of tornado watches, but it didn't ever get super scary because it was northwest of us. And as it was approaching, they kept saying it's starting to disintegrate. But I was worried about the cars and hail and the roof and all that. And it turned out we got lots of rain, but we didn't have anything scary. But a lot of people to the northwest of us did. So we need the rain and it's supposed to be raining more this week, but I don't know. I'm just a little bit nervous about being in a tornado warning. And
Yeah. What
we
do
went on
you
about our
feel?
business and we were doing our dishes and
hmm
I guess this was Monday night, so it was Memorial Day. And I thought, should we be clearing out the closet in the hallway? But we had the news on and it was showing the radar and we could tell that it was still like 25 miles. And I don't think they ever even acknowledged that there was a tornado on the ground, but those are not fun.
I,
They are serious business.
I found out this last round that we had when we spent the night in the basement, um, Hiram and Brittany Kemp's neighbor had a gazebo
Mm.
and it was picked up and flung into the air, and the leg of it came off and rammed itself into their house.
Wow.
And so they
They do
have,
the strangest things.
yeah, so they have a big hole near the top of their house, I think like right under the roof. And it came into Hiram's mother lives with them, her room.
Thanks.
And so there's a big hole in there, and they've got to do the whole, insulation
Mhm.
and vinyl siding on the outside and insulation and drywall and all that kind of stuff on the inside. And like it's a big repair.
And it's
And
so
the
random.
neighbor's property is fine.
Yeah. That's what's so random about it. It can be like
Mhm.
one piece of wood and everything else is okay, but it's just those high winds just do weird things.
Mhm.
Well, we have a couple of baby owls. I sent you a picture of them. And I
So
think there might
cute.
even be three. They are so cute. They're almost ugly cute because they're covered in that what is it? They're like molting. It
Oh,
looks like they're molting, which I guess maybe they do when they put on their adult feathers. But my
mm.
brother built us an owl house like, I don't know, 10 years ago. And it's just a big box and it's got an opening that's maybe 6 inches square. And then it has two branches that extend from either side. And he told us you have to put it in the certain area where it's like I may be saying it wrong, but like south facing. And they have to have a clear path to be able to fly into it. And for several years, we had owls. Like every year, we would have owls, and it's right outside our dining room window, so we can look out at dusk. And usually, we'd see them, but we didn't have any for several years, and we didn't know why. It was like they just left, and we thought, do we need to trim the trees or what? But we took it down not too long ago. This is kind of gross. We took it down, and we found a little owl carcass in it.
Oh,
So one of them had died in there and it was
oh.
fully decayed. I mean, it was just bones by the time we found it. But I imagine maybe the scent of it probably scared them off. So we cleaned it out and now we have, I'm pretty sure it's three of them because I know we've had, I've gotten pictures of two of them, and it's funny because you can hear like little scrabbling noises down in the bottom of the box. Like the third one is saying, "Hey, it's my turn. Let me up there. I want to see." John and I, we have officially become those people those
Yeah,
old people that sit outside with the bird
watch
app,
the
and we're like,
birds.
okay, what kind of an owl is it? And making the sounds, and John's trying to call all the birds, and they do. If he plays the noises, you can see that their heads will turn and I think they're probably thinking how they're going to peck him on the head or maybe me if I get in the way too. But it's been fun. We've been watching those little owls and they fly off and they make the weirdest head motions. And I know I'm sounding older and older the more I talk
No,
here.
I think it's fascinating. We hear owls almost every night, but I've literally never even seen one.
Yeah.
So when you sent those pictures, I just thought that was the coolest thing.
Well, they're so well camouflaged. I mean, they probably sitting right above your head all the time and you just can't see them. So it's fun. We've
How
enjoyed
about
it.
that? That's
Yeah.
cool.
What else
Mhm.
going on around there?
Well, I have a couple of fun things to show you. One is Heather Pascal gave me this like world's tiniest pickleball set.
Is it a keychain?
Yes.
Oh, that's fun.
And it's got two little paddles and two little pickleballs and two balls and a keychain.
Your grandkids will take those over before too long.
Well, it's kind of a theme because while we were in Florida, I found this cute little sweatshirt
Just
and
think
it
it.
says, just dink it.
It's cute.
And I think I've talked about that on here before, but that's a
Mhm.
pickleball term.
Yeah.
And so I had to get it. And then we got back in town and went to worship on Sunday. And then Heather Pascal gave me this little tiniest pickleball set ever. So I just wanted to share that. That was really fun. And then the other little random thing, before I forget that I wanted to share, our son Dale told me that he was in West Virginia over the weekend and visited this small congregation in Crum. I think it's Crum,
Okay.
Crum, West Virginia. And a couple of the ladies came up and started talking to him and asked him again to repeat his last name. And so they ended up telling him that they listened to the podcast and they love it. And so it was really sweet to have Dale come back
Hmm.
and share with me the encouragement that he had received from these ladies about it. But I just thought we could kind of say a hi to them. I believe he said their names were Bobby and Amy, their mother and daughter. I
Mm.
think that's what he said. So, thank you so much for listening. We always appreciate that and for the encouragement and saying something to Dale, who then came and said something to us. And then I shared it with Carla. So, we appreciate you listening and your encouragement for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. That was sweet for Dale to tell you about it too, to
Hmm.
remember. Not all guys would remember to do something like that.
Right, right. That's true.
That's neat.
So, and then the last random thing, do y'all have cicadas right
Hmm.
now? Okay. We had just figured out what's going on because after that whole series of storms came through, we started noticing that the woods sound like they're screaming. We have
Hmm.
woods all around our property. And so many times it doesn't matter what time of day it is, middle of the day, late at night, or whatever. If we're standing outside, we just stop and listen, and our jaw almost drops at how deafening it is. And so many times we have said, it sounds like we're in Cambodia.
Mm.
And finally, it dawned on me, I wonder if this is cicadas. And I looked it up, and sure enough, it is. I even wrote down the information. It's group 14. They've been underground for 17 years.
Well, this is one of those things. Yeah.
Yes. So
Creepy
they are all really making the most of their
because they don't live very long.
emergence or whatever you call it, huh?
They don't live very long, right? They crawl up a tree and hatch and die or
I
something.
know they shed their little
Yeah.
skeleton-y things. They kind of give me the willies.
Mhm.
I believe some people eat them.
Okay.
Yes, but
Protein.
anyway, but they sound almost creepy.
Well, we had that's in every. I know that I think that is an unusual thing for y'all to have the every 17-year deal. We have them every summer. So to me, it's a happy summertime noise and probably not as loud as what you're talking about. But at night, I can always tell when June is approaching because the cicadas start singing and when it's really hot outside, you hear them. And so to me, it just makes me think it's summertime. And I like that noise at night. Of course, it's muted outside, but it
Yeah.
makes me think it's summertime.
Well, we definitely have summertime noises. It typically involves tree frogs, and we have a great big bullfrog in the pond right next to us that we hear him all the time.
Hmm.
But this was just way different. It's so loud. I can
Maybe
hear
you can
it now.
record
I
it
am
and send it to me.
inside with all the doors and windows closed, and I
Hmm.
can hear them.
Yeah. This is random. I saw a video of a little girl that picked up the shells or whatever their car, what would it be? Their
I don't know.
exoskeleton or whatever.
Mhm.
She picked up like 10 or 20 of them and then she put them over the light bulb on a strand of lights. And then she hung it up and it was like a cicada. Yeah, that's random, but
Creative. That's creative.
maybe it was out there on Instagram or whatever because of this phenomenon that y'all are going through right now.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you could go outside, collect you some
Mm-mm.
exoskeletons of the cicadas and make you a little
Neil
light
said
strand.
he was mowing the other day and one landed on his neck. And he said he was sure it didn't actually take that long, but it felt like it took him about 3 minutes to get that thing off of him.
John told me the other day that because I get a little squeamish about flying, stinging critters. And he said, and I quote, "That's the only time you act like a girl." And I was like,
That's supposed to mean.
I don't know how to take that because I think I act like a girl all the time, but
Uh,
apparently any
he
like
probably
screamy
meant,
type noises come out of my
yeah,
mouth.
yeah. And you're probably a go-getter, you don't shy away from doing things and
Well, he said, "You're usually pretty tough, but apparently I'm not very tough when it comes to wasps." And I'm not. I mean, even that little tennis racket thing that what do you call it? The
The
zapper?
executioner?
Yes, the executioner. I'm afraid to use that because they get too close to me. So I give it to him and I mean, I'd be like swinging it all over and then they'd come and sting me on the other side of it, but he'll just go tap them and it's such a satisfying sizzle sound.
Is yeah. I hold it in place till it starts smoking.
That's a little creepy. A little I don't know, cruel. Didn't know you had it
Well,
in you.
I typically, if I'm using it, I only use it for when wasps get in the house. I don't
Yeah.
use it on anything outside. So if I've got one pressed up against the window, and it's zapping and sizzling, I'm waiting for it to start smoking so I know it's good and dead before I pull away. So,
Well, we put it out on the deck, so because we have red wasps that are always flying around on the deck. But I
Mhm.
still jump up and run, and I guess apparently that's the only time I act like a girl.
That's funny.
So I haven't talked about this in a while, and I had a couple of people ask me about it, the GLP-1 medicine that I was taking, which was really not a GLP-1, it was the different level, and I can't remember what it's called. It was tirzepatide for weight loss. And
Mhm.
so back in February, I the way they do it, you have to start at a low dose and then you add and you add and you add until you find the effective dose. And I had to keep going up because I could tell a little bit of difference in my appetite or whatever. And I didn't expect it to just completely take it away, but I didn't really feel any yet. I had gone up to the next to the highest dose right before we went to Bear Valley in February. And so we got there mid-February, and that week I was sick. And I mean, that was one of the weeks that we didn't record because I wasn't feeling well.
Right.
And it was just weird symptoms. And it started out as like being stomach pain. And I'll spare all of the details for the rest of it. But when I went to the doctor when we got home, I reminded her that I had gone up on the dose. She said, "Oh, that's it. That's got to be it." And she recommended just go back down to where you were the previous dose and stay there and see how that works. And so I did that one more week, and there was symptoms that, shall I say, were not compatible with traveling. And we
Mm,
were about to leave on our tour, Turkey and Greece tour, about a week and a half, 2 weeks later. And I couldn't do it. I could not see, there was some results. I didn't have great results, and I know a lot of people have, and I didn't. And I just couldn't see continuing with the expense of it and the risk of traveling with that particular symptom was not a good idea. And then being in a country that doesn't have bathrooms readily available everywhere you go. So I
exactly.
just decided just not take it anymore. And I know she told me that if you don't, then you have to start back at ground zero and work your way back up. And I'm not opposed to that at some point in the future, but for now, I'm not. I gave that up, I don't know, late February, I guess. So March, April, May, 3 months ago. But so I've started Weight Watchers again. I know you had good success with that. I lost 70 pounds on Weight Watchers back in 2011. So I know it's a good program. It's just common sense.
Mhm.
And it teaches you a different way of eating. But the thing is, if you slide away from that, we all do that. And
Mhm.
so I'm just trying to remember things that I've learned before and be common sense about it and eat smart and it's a good program. It's time tested and true.
Mhm. Yeah, and it helps that they keep adding more and more food options to the 0 point list
Hmm.
because now potatoes are on that list
Yeah.
and steak,
Hmm.
like red meats, are on that list.
Even like 90% and higher lean ground beef is 0 points.
Mhm.
And don't you think it has more to do psychologically than scientifically? Because when you know that you can still eat something even if your points are gone, but you get full because
Mhm.
you're eating smarter. At least I do.
When Neil and I started it, it seemed like it was too easy. to have
Hmm.
that many free points that I didn't think it was going to work and, that it wouldn't be effective. But it is because it's still, you don't realize, or at least I didn't, how many things you mindlessly eat.
Yeah.
And I don't consider myself a big eater. Like I have a late breakfast, usually a smoothie, and then one meal. I don't even consider myself a big eater, but there's a lot of things that I might mindlessly eat or things that I think are, you know, overall decent for you.
Hmm.
And then you find out how many points I was consuming, on Weight Watchers. And so just that mindfulness of being more aware of the choices that you make. But it is, I find it to be very doable, very easy, and it is effective. It does work, or at least
Yeah.
it did for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that my metabolism has something to do with me, and there's the whole self-control issue, which I mean, I never did regain what I lost. There were times that I tend to be up and down, but I
Mhm.
never did go back up as high as I was. I didn't even get within 40 pounds of where I was before. So I attribute that to Weight Watchers because it taught me, like you said, it's kind of common sense. You can't eat 72 pretzels and think, oh, well, they're really not all that high in calorie. But when you have 72 of them, there are. So when you take out 10 of them or 12 of them and see a little pile there, then that helps me just to have that knowledge. So anyway, I tried a recipe on that I saw online. I joined some Facebook groups that are Weight Watchers recipes, and you can't trust all those. You still have to do the math yourself or do the calculation in the app. But one of them was for 0 point banana pancakes. Did you ever try anything like that?
Mhm.
Well, maybe you have a secret because I tried and they tasted good. You have to have ripe bananas. So it's two bananas, two eggs, like half a teaspoon of cinnamon and a teaspoon of baking powder or soda. I can't remember which one, powder, I think. And you blend them together and then you cook them like pancakes. And then you can dust them with a little powdered sugar if you want that. I had some sugar-free syrup that worked too. But you know how you ruin the first two pancakes anytime you make pancakes. So I had Micah over here yesterday. He was working on something in the pantry, and I wanted him to taste them because I thought they were really good. And so I told him, I said, I was working on the first two, and I said, well, you know how you ruin the first two? He said, yeah. Well, he walked back and forth behind me as I'm continuing to work on pancakes, trying to make one decent round pancake flip. And he walked past me like the fourth time. He said, yeah, you know how you ruin the first seven pancakes? So it was more like a pancake souffle kind of thing, or maybe scrambled bananas and eggs. I don't know.
Oh, gross.
I know that does sound gross, but that's basically what it is, right? So do you
Well,
have a secret to keeping them together?
I practically lived on that when we first started Weight Watchers. That was my breakfast almost every morning, but I made them silver dollar size
Okay.
because they're way easier to flip. And then
Okay.
I always topped mine with fresh, like nectarines. I'd dice up and then some fresh mint. And it just made it seem
A
a little
treat.
more, yeah, like a treat. Yeah, exactly. And so that was my breakfast almost every morning. And then I found out about the one that you can bake with just a little bit of oatmeal added to it, and you bake it in a loaf pan. You add frozen blueberries. So it's sort of the same principle with the mashed bananas and the eggs, and but you add a little oatmeal and frozen blueberries and cinnamon and bake it in a loaf pan, and the whole thing is like 3 points.
Yeah.
And but half of it is, way plenty for a breakfast. So
Mhm.
it was little things like that that made it easier for me because it kind of felt like it was something yummy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to have ripe bananas, unless you
Yes.
don't want ripe, but I like the ripe, just, when they're starting to get little dots or
Mhm.
beyond.
Mhm.
Well, send me that recipe then, because I'll
Okay.
try that better if it's baked, because maybe it has to do with my spatula or something, but I could not flip a pancake to save my life.
Well, and isn't oatmeal one of the new
It's
free?
free.
So that one would be even better now.
You blend
But
it in or you just stir it in
oh, just stir it up.
so it holds it together better.
Mhm.
Hmm. Okay. Well, send me your recipes because
Okay.
I've been on, I guess, a week now. And it's not about so much about how I look, although that has something to do with it, but it's just like Shannon Ketchum told me not long ago that for every pound that you lose, you're taking off, I want to say like 7 pounds of pressure off your knees.
Oh, really?
Maybe it's 4 pounds. It's something like that. I'll check with her. But my knees, they're starting, the arthritis is worse, and both of us hobble around. I don't want to be like that. I want to be able to do things and get up off the floor like you and I tried to do a while back. I just want to not have trouble with things like that. I want to be healthy as long as I can. So,
Yes. Yes.
and then
Good.
one more thing, unless you have stuff,
No,
I
I'm good.
wanted to talk about next October. This is something exciting. We had on the calendar, on Bible passages on the tour page, we had a cruise that we were going to do with Neil and Kathy, Mediterranean cruise, but the cruise lines are still not including Israel on their itineraries. One or two of them are, but they just weren't what we were hoping for. It wasn't like the one we did a year and a half ago with y'all, which ended up we couldn't go to Israel anyway because of what happened.
Mhm.
So next year, Lord willing, if all goes according to plan and things stay, they're never going to be 100% peaceful, but neither is the United States or anywhere else you go is not going to be 100% peaceful. But we have two trips in March, actually. The first one's full, the second one's half full, but we're going to go ahead and do 2 weeks in Israel, me and John and you and Neil. And if anyone else wants to go along, up to about probably around 50. It'll probably be somewhere around the second week of October until the next to the last week. We don't know the exact dates yet, but we'll be working on that. So if you want to think about coming along with us to Israel, we
Mhm.
would love for lots of looking up people to come along with us. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Sure would.
We can look up from Israel.
Mhm.
But it'll, like I said, October 2026, and it's tentatively on the website. It still says cruise, but we'll change that pretty soon. And we'll have details as soon as we can start getting them all arranged. But I'm excited.
I'm so excited.
Well, we haven't been there
I've missed going there and spending some time there.
yeah. And I know that they have found new things because they've been busy doing digging and finding things. So there's lots of new things for us to see and do. And so we're real excited about that.
Yeah, me
Stay
too.
tuned for that.
Yay.
Okay. You have anything
Mhm.
else?
Nope. Ready for you.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is the best way I could think to categorize it is de-escalating approaching conflict, which sounds like such a sterile way of saying it. But basically, just before you get deep into an argument or a fight or whatever you want to call it, what can we do to de-escalate things, to make things feel better, to not let it get to the point where we get out of control, which we shouldn't anyway. And when I say get out of control, just make it better before we get mad, before we really say things we wish we hadn't, before we get to that point of 3 days of not talking to each other. And I mean, let's be real. That happens to us sometimes, and we're not immune to that. We have conflict. And, a lot of people, I think, are surprised when, what, the preacher or the minister or the whoever, this person in ministry has fights. Yes, we have disagreements. We are people, we're human. And this happened to us last week, which is what made me think about us talking about it today. But I pat myself on the back, sort of a little bit, because I shouldn't really, because we've been married for nearly 39 years. And why is it really taking me this long to have some light bulbs come on? I have before, but I think I sat and thought about it last week that this was a successful handling of this conflict that came up and what was different about it. And that's what I thought we could talk about.
Okay, teach me your ways.
Well, I'm sure it'll happen again, but I went back and looked at previous episodes because, we try not to repeat a whole lot of things, but probably, like we said, not everybody listens to every single episode, and not everybody remembers every little thing that we say, as
Mhm.
hard to believe as that is. And I thought, we did one episode called Humble Pie, eating humble pie, and that was kind of along these lines. And then there was another one about making things right. So if people wanted a little bit different take or a little bit more information, they could go back and listen to those episodes. But de-escalating conflict, and I've tried to decide how much of the disagreement to share, like what it was about. And I can't really go further with this without just saying what it was about. So John
Speak.
won't, he won't listen and he won't care anyway. He doesn't mind. But after we finished recording, this happened right after we finished recording. And it wasn't because of what we talked about, but it added to what I had been feeling. And you even said on last week's podcast that y'all work together. You get to spend all this time together. But part of the problem with that, while I love it and I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I'm so thankful we get to do it, but part of the problem with that is that we talk about, these business related things and these just, it's not a conversation you want to have all day long, but we'll be talking about, well, did you hear back from Amalia? Or did you find out about that hotel and wherever? Or did someone else sign up today? Or did you, well, all these business related things. And so I'm forever telling him, like I said last week, I don't want to just be your business partner. I want it to be more than that. And of course it is, but we have to be more conscious of it. And I felt like we were sliding down into this hole that we often slide down into when we don't reconnect. And with things being as busy as they've been recently, it's just kind of, after we finished recording, I was like, you haven't taken me on a getaway. We haven't gone anywhere fun. I want to go sit on the beach somewhere. I know I was feeling pretty sorry for myself, which is really dumb. But and I can't remember. There something else had happened earlier that week that there was already a little bit of tension. So we were down in this little hole. What is it y'all call it when
For
you think
clacking.
clacking instead of clicking? Yeah.
Mhm.
So we were clacking, definitely clacking. And it wasn't where we weren't. I mean, we were still laughing and talking and it was things were fine, but
Right.
they weren't great. So when I came out of recording and he came out of his office and he started asking me business questions and I'm sure I had a perfectly wonderful look on my face, but for whatever reason, he said, "Is something wrong? And are you okay?" And here's a really dumb thing about me. I hate it when he says, "Are you okay?" Because it's not the real question. He knows that things are not okay. And that is so childish of me, I know. But I think, you could dig a little deeper. You already know something's wrong. Don't ask me if I'm okay. Okay, so now you really know something terribly immature about me. So I I sat there. We're sitting on opposite sides of the living room and I could start feeling myself going down into that same old pattern of here we are again. We're talking about the same thing we've talked about before. Why can't things get better in this area? And I could see he's thinking the same thing. Oh, she's going down that same path and I know how he's thinking and he knows how I'm thinking, but we can't seem to get on a groove sometimes. And so I thought this time I'm going to try to be an adult here and try to take responsibility for my feelings because I realize that there's that expectation thing. He would be happy to go on a little getaway. Maybe not where I would prefer to go, but he'd do it. He'd do it. But am I expecting him to immediately know what I want to do, where I want to go, what I want to do when we get there? It's just one of those silly things that it's just not going to happen that way. Is he okay? He needs a
Yes.
hug. Anyway, it's just,
Keep talking. I think I'm gonna have an interruption, but you keep talking.
okay, love on Ollie. Hmm. So anyway, I just tried to think about different things that I could change about the way that I was presenting how I felt. And it worked out so much better. It worked out so much better because of that. And John, I have to make this clarification because not all husbands are going to react the same way. I realize that not all men are going to listen and really be interested and he is, and I recognize that. So I understand. But I usually what I do is I shut down because I don't communicate as well as he does. And then he keeps asking me, he wants more information and I'm still trying to think. And so I'm just being quiet. So this time I thought, I'm just going to talk. I'm just going to talk. I'm going to try to do it kindly. I'm going to try to do it with a nice tone of voice and see how this goes. And so I did. And we were able to talk it out and we ended up laughing about some things. We ended up getting in the car and going and having a Chick-fil-A salad. And it was just so much nicer than what usually happens, which is 2 or 3 days of uncomfortable. Even if we make things right, it still doesn't feel great. So anyway, that's what I want to talk about.
Hmm.
I always ramble, but I think I was able to get out what we're, does that make sense what we're going to talk about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm
So,
looking forward to it. I need it.
so I want your tips. If
You're the
I
one that had the epiphany.
if I spill my guts, you have to spill yours too.
Well, I
Um,
will say that as you were talking, I could see myself in that. I mean, completely resonated with me. And you kept using words like that pattern, getting back into that pattern or getting back into that habit. And if we have people listening to this episode that haven't been married for 30 plus years like we have, I think that right off the bat is so key that you're kind of setting the table when you first get married. How you handle conflict
mhm,
really does kind of set the table. And
mhm,
so easy if it's done in a negative way, without respect and good communication and, taking into account all those things that we always hear. And it just kind of sets the table for what could end up being years and years of this vicious cycle. Things are fine until that same old thing, that whatever that issue is that doesn't get resolved is always kind of hovering below the surface. And, it sounds like you have one, we have one. Maybe that's something that's pretty common in marriages. I don't know. I don't really talk to people about that.
mhm.
But if you've set a pattern for handling conflict in this whole, I'm just determined to win this round, then you could face years of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking that the purpose of this episode is so share those things that maybe we've learned the hard way, and like the new approach that you took. You had to be, we're going to use the word intentional again. You had to be very
Mhm.
intentional about that, and it made the biggest difference. And so even when it seems oversimplified, like what the Bible says about how you handle anger or pride or any of those things that get in the way and create conflict, even it might seem oversimplified, but it works and it's effective, and you can save your marriage years of heartache.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And there's something that we share in marriage counseling or marriage seminars that's like 8 steps to resolving conflict. And I always think when we were sharing that, I think, is anybody really going to say, okay, step number one, let's see. Okay, would you like to meet me on the couch at 8, that kind of thing. But I think when you look at them, they're things that you put into practice and they come automatically when you start practicing them, and one of them is scheduling a time when you both agree that you want to talk about it. Sometimes you can't. You're too emotional or there's kids that are demanding your attention or you have to be somewhere. But if you leave it open-ended, that's not helpful. But if you schedule a time anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But some of the things that I realized afterwards, we'll talk about some of the tips. I have like three tips. But what I realized afterwards, the main thing, I always feel better after we really, really hash it out. Usually it
Mhm.
takes a lot longer. And then I'm like back to normal.
Mhm.
And I'm like, how does that happen? And I realized, I think this time, that I just need to communicate it to him. I need him to hear it. I need him to not even, he doesn't even have to understand it. But if I know that he is listening to me and he cares about what I'm saying, how I'm feeling, then I just feel loads better. It's like a
Mhm.
huge weight is lifted and then I can go back to normal. In some ways that's not the best because if you don't get to the bottom of it and solve it, then it's going to come back up again. But I think even just this time realizing that, I don't know, it was like a light bulb came on. I just need to tell him what's wrong. But in order to tell him what's wrong, I have to figure out what's wrong. So I have to kind of do some internal search. But instead of what I usually do, which is internalize everything and clam up, I decided to just talk. When that's so easy for him because that's what he does. He talks all the time. And I don't, which might be surprising because we talk to each other, but I'm not really like that all the time, you know? You and I both introverts, whatever. But some of the things that I wrote down, I realized afterwards that I had a response. This is such a common sense thing, obviously, but I needed to communicate to him what it was that I needed and wanted. And really what that was his attention.
Mhm.
And it, when you think about you hear about it with parenting, your kids want your attention so much that sometimes they're willing to resort to negative attention to get your attention. And I kind of asked myself, is that what I'm doing? I'm willing to just get negative attention, but it's not hard to get his attention. He melts like butter if I walk up and hug him, so it's not that. So I had to kind of think, what is it that I need here? What is it that I want? Um, then another thing I had to realize is what part I'm playing in this conflict. Because usually when you go into a conflict, you've got the blinders on to yourself. You only see what part he's playing in it and why you're annoyed with him or irritated with him or he's not doing what you want him to do. But what is it that I've done that has led up to this point, which again is a very duh kind of thing, but sometimes you just have to come by it in a hard way. But I think one of the main things that I have not done very well in nearly 39 years of marriage is in a conflict. I don't, and we've talked about this before, I don't want you to hug me. Not you. I mean, you can hug me when we're in a conflict, but
Thanks.
but I don't want him. I think it's because if he's too near, like I can't think clear and I just need you to sit over there. But that to him is very off-putting. And so I really intentionally this time I think I said, pretty sure I did. I said, I love you. I know you love me, and I'm sorry. I'm just trying to work through this. But he needed to see that I loved him. He needed to see that I could be calm in the middle of an argument. And again, it's not like I haven't done this before in 39 years, but it's honestly, it's just a pattern, and it's something that I really had to do some thinking about. So anyway, here I am spilling my guts in front of whoever's listening, all of our however many listeners we have, and just saying what are some ways that we can approach conflict, be intentional in how we approach it and how we handle it to defuse it before it gets bad.
Mhm.
And the first tip is not really a tip, but when I looked back on it, it was right after we recorded. And so we had prayed about it before. I didn't even realize it because we were praying about last week's podcast. But there was something that we talked about, probably because we talked about what y'all had done and I was, feeling a little bit jealous. And so I don't remember what I said. When you drive that week's podcast, then I'm the one that prays and vice versa. So I was the one that prayed last week. And I remember asking God to help me in this area. I don't remember what I said, but I was thinking about it when I was praying, to have a good attitude about it and to not let it blow up in our relationship. And I didn't say it like that, but that's kind of what I was thinking. So I look back on that and think, well, praying really does help. And it does anyway. And when you have a conflict that's starting to flare up, if you can stop and pray with your husband, ask him to pray, or or you pray in your head, whatever it is. But there's something about humbling yourself before God that makes you realize, okay, this is a serious thing. What am I overreacting about? I know that this matters to God because it matters to me. So the first thing I think to do is to pray together, or pray alone. So what do you think? I'm talking too
Okay,
much.
I'm taking notes. I just put number one, pray, exclamation point. And, like you said, it sounds so simple and kind of a no duh thing, but do you do it? Do I do it?
I don't want
The
to.
moment, yeah, I don't want to. And I don't want to think about it. And I don't want to be reminded that I'm supposed to because I've got my stubborn will
Mm-hmm.
ruling instead of the peace of Christ reigning in my heart. But that really is brilliant because in a way, you're inviting the Lord into that conflict with you and
Mm-hmm.
making him a participant in it. And my, wouldn't that change the flavor of the interaction
Oh,
just by
completely.
inviting him into the room intentionally?
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up that verse about let the peace of Christ rule or reign. I think you said reign. And one that I've learned was rule, and it means to umpire.
Mhm.
One of the definitions says to umpire. So when you think about the umpire behind the plate ruling whether or not it's a foul or a strike, that's kind of, you can throw some really foul balls when you're arguing, and you can say some things that are really dumb and wrong. But yeah, it just changes things when you've prayed about it and sincerely asked God to help you with your own attitude, and not praying that he'll change your husband's mind or heart or actions or whatever, but your own. It's just humbling. Prayer has that effect. If we are praying in the will of God, it has the effect of humbling us and reminding us that this is a serious matter. And it reminds me too that he cares. Not,
Mhm.
it's not, sometimes we think that there's so many other important things going on in the world. Why would he care about this silly little argument that we're having? But he does. He cares because it affects me. So that's probably the biggest help, is to pray before things start escalating. The
Mhm.
second one that I've already kind of alluded to is you can use the word either consider or assess, but mainly assess what is wrong with me, and what is at the root of whatever is bothering me. And so with our situation last week, it wasn't that he hadn't taken me on a little getaway. It was that we hadn't spent enough time together. And again, everybody thinks we spend all of our time together, but it's just not the same as like the whole episode that we spent last week talking about the value of getting away and putting work aside and focusing on each other. And that's what I was missing. And here
Mhm.
I was expressing anger to him because he wasn't being loving to me. And he was, but not in the way that I wanted him to. So that was my problem. And I had not communicated that to him. I think he knows that, but just like any other human being, like John is, he needed a reminder of that. When things seem to be going okay, floating along, you're in your groove of whatever you've got going on, things are okay, but are they great? But okay, well, we'll address that later. And that's where I was. I was just feeling um not cherished, I guess.
Yeah.
So thinking about, why am I upset? And I think that's just really key. What is at the root of why I am mad? And if we stop to pray and stop to think, okay, what's behind this? It's always helpful. And even the way we say things, and I tried this, instead of saying, you never have done this. And I think I said something more along the lines of, I need more time, which really is not as good as what he would like. He would rather me say, I love it when we can go places together. But I feel like I sound so, that's just not natural. And it should be, when he's talking in marriage seminars, he'll say, here's some things you should never say. And instead, say it this way: I love it when we cuddle. And I would just feel like I'm the biggest idiot if I said something like that. But he would love it. So I tried to frame my words more in ways that I knew that he would hear it. And I feel like I'm patting myself on the back, but really I'm not, because I'm ashamed of how long it really has taken me to understand this. So, it's irritating in a way to have to stop and think, how would he receive this better? But it's really, that's a selfish thing to not be willing to think about, how can I communicate this to him in a way that he'll understand it more and it'll come across as that I love him and I want to be with him, rather than you never do this. So
Don't we do that in every other thing though? Consider your target audience.
if
You
we're
know,
smart,
what if you're trying to sell something or present a lesson or, create an ad or whatever you're doing, you always consider who you're trying to reach
yeah.
and with whatever you're trying to impress upon them, because that helps you know the best way to reach them. So if we're willing to do that with everything else, why wouldn't we use that same wisdom in our own marriages and our own relationships? And I was thinking about the prayer um, is good for the number two, because assessing what is actually wrong. I feel like I'm a lot better at, I can see when my attitude stinks. I mean, it's not like a surprise to me. It's not like Neil would say, you really need to dial back the sarcasm or the temper or the whatever it is. I know, I'm fully aware of it. Usually
Yeah.
in my mind, I'm going, what is your problem, Kathy?
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah. It's like
why
that
are
inner
you
voice
being,
saying,
yeah, why are you being so petty? Why are you being so immature about this? Why are you even making this? All that stuff is screaming at me in my head. My greater challenge is what you just said we should be doing, and that is figuring out what exactly is going on with me
mhm,
and what is at the root of the problem, because then you can address the issue instead of attacking your best friend
yeah,
and putting it all on him like it's his fault. This is his problem and he did this and now I'm mad.
yeah, exactly. Because the emotional side takes over,
Mhm.
and instead of the logical side. And yeah, yeah, happens to me all the time. So pray, assess, and then the last one, which really has some sub points, because
It's
but
just a 3-point sermon
yeah, yeah,
with sub points.
there's no alliteration here. But the last one is just to be a grown up.
Oh man.
I know it's tough. 57 years old, I have to be a grown up. But all the things that I think of as being a grown up, which a lot of grown ups are not, but be a Christian grown up is probably a better way of saying that, is about humility, you know, being humble. And I'm not very good at that sometimes, especially with John. Why? And you've just said that about, we consider our target audience, but usually with some other target audience, our heart is not as involved.
Mhm.
So I guess maybe it's easy to be humble with other people and not so much as far as putting yourself, having the attitude of Christ and having, thinking of someone else as more important than you. And it's easier to do that with other people than the ones that we love the most. Why is that? I don't understand that. I never have understood that. Maybe we just feel more comfortable with them to
Yeah.
let it all hang out.
Mhm.
But being humble, and I meant to bring this passage up earlier, but godly wisdom, James 3, that talks about godly wisdom. It's peaceable, it's gentle, it's reasonable, it's full of mercy. And then the very end of that verse says, the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace.
Mm.
And when you really break that down or just look at it, just look at that. We want the fruit of righteousness in our home. And how do we get that? It's sown in peace. So if we are sowing the seeds of peace in our home, righteousness grows. And you grow more peace. It's just like that quote that I read earlier from Robert Fulghum. You just it's something that you give, it's something that you do. So um I think that James 3 and looking at godly wisdom, of course, there's Philippians 2 that talks about having the attitude of Christ, the servant's attitude. Think about all these Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath. That's one of those passages I learned in the King James. So I don't remember exactly what it says in a different, huh?
Was it a soft answer?
Soft answer turns away wrath,
Mhm.
but a harsh word stirs up anger. Um, Colossians 4:6, that our words need to be with grace, seasoned with salt. It makes it easier to swallow, makes it easier for people to hear, and it's just better. Um, Titus 3, I know taking things a little bit out of context, but they can still apply to what we're talking about. Being peaceable and gentle and showing every consideration to our husbands. Psalm 34:4, seek peace and pursue it. Proverbs 21:23, guard your mouth and your tongue, and you'll guard your soul from trouble. I have a little trouble with that, guarding my tongue.
Mm.
Proverbs 12:18, there's one who speaks rashly like the thrusts of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. So you think about when we speak rashly, we don't think about what we're speaking. It's like stabbing, it hurts. But the wise person, their tongue brings healing. So I meant to bring those up earlier in this context. So being a grown up, humility, tamping down our emotions, like you were just saying. What is wrong with you, Carla? What does my face say?
Oh no.
And this is something he tells me all the time. He'll say, not all the time, when we have a disagreement, he'll say, you don't even look like you love me right now. And I don't know why I'm that way, but I that day on Saturday I really tried to for my face to show because I love him more than anybody else on this earth, and I want him to know that even when I'm mad at him or disappointed or whatever. But what does my face show? So I need to tamp down my emotions.
Your
And
face. I'm just writing all this down. Don't mind me.
and then resisting old patterns. We've already talked about that, but I wrote that under being a grown up. And my old patterns tend to be silence. And I don't really think of that as because what I really mean by that is I need a little time to think this over. And either that or it's I can't communicate like you could communicate. So I'm just gonna shut down. Just leave me alone and I'll think about it. And I need to not be that way. And then don't touch me. I'm that way. Don't touch me, don't hug me until I figure this out. We've already talked about if somebody wants to go back and listen to, was it Humble Pie or Making Things Right? One of those, we talked about
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
for a long time, and both of us had some changes that we went to make right after that episode. So humility, tamp down emotions, resist old patterns, and then acknowledge our own faults. So um, I had to acknowledge to him, I know you can't read my mind. I think he can sometimes, but when it comes to take me to the beach for a getaway, he can't read my mind. But I think if I just would suggest it in a nice way, or even just say, hey, clear off your calendar in June of whatever.
Mhm.
Say, okay, what are we doing? Or he'd say, is there a better, we could talk about it. But instead, what I did was build up resentment and anger because he hadn't done what something I had not communicated to him. So what if he doesn't respond the way I want him to respond? This brings back that Romans 12:10, go first and lead the way
Mhm.
responsibility that we have. So there we have it. That's pretty much all that I have is to pray, to assess, and to be a grown up.
Mm. It's really good. It's really good. I had one of the last thing that you just said kind of ties into one of them. And if they don't respond in kind,
Mhm.
one of mine was give them time to see that your change is legit. Because we're kind of talking about breaking some old habits, some bad
Mhm.
habits, and breaking some patterns and creating new ones so that you can have more productive,
Mhm.
wholesome conflict. Because conflict is going to happen. And so, have you ever like had good intentions and I'm going to handle things differently from now on? I'm going to be more mature. I'm going to be more humble. I'm going to be more patient. And today's the day, and then you you do all those things, but they didn't get the memo, and
They
then that
decided
makes you
today's a good day to
mad.
push
And
the
then you're
button.
just, yeah. So you have to be patient with yourself and with your spouse and give it the time it's going to take to prove that your intention to change and be all the things that you should be as a Christ-like spouse are legit. And
Mhm.
you might not do it perfectly and you might stumble, but you're really serious about this. But that's going to take some time because they also have been dealing with the years of this is how we've handled it.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take some time to prove that the change is legit. And
Mhm.
so be patient with each other.
Great point.
Yeah. And then I was thinking about a comment that was made in our class last night. Rachel Mauser was here, and we were actually talking about the subject of gossip. Um, and she said that, whether you're thinking about your work environment or with friends or whatever, she said that she's always felt like it was so important to have the kind of reputation that if somebody said to somebody else about her, well, Rachel said this about so and so, that they would be flabbergasted. They would just be so surprised because she has created a reputation of one who doesn't gossip.
Mm.
And so instead of swallowing that hook, line, and sinker, like she said, what? That they would go,
Are you
Rachel,
sure about
are
that?
you sure that's right? Are you sure you
Uh-huh.
heard that right? Are you sure whoever told you that knew what they were talking about? Because they know her character. And I was thinking about that in light, first of all, I loved that, thought that was
Mm.
genius. But in light of this kind of conversation, sometimes the conflict comes because your spouse might say or do something and you react with, how could you even think that of me? Why? Of course I didn't mean that. Of course I didn't intend that. Why would you even think that?
Mhm.
Well, maybe the reason they thought that is because we've given them reason to think that, that that's been our MO. That's how we responded. That's how we've lashed out or, said things that were snarky or whatever it was. But if instead we tried to create this consistent character and demeanor of one who is patient, thinks things through maturely, is approachable, isn't going to fly off the handle, isn't going to let pride rear its ugly head.
Mhm.
If instead we're creating this reputation with our own husband, then it'll affect him too. And how when we are trying to bring something to him, he'll go, well, I know she's not typically upset over dumb things. So there must be something here, like create that character with
Mhm.
all of your other interactions with your spouse so that when conflict does come, it can be handled so much more lovingly, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last one was this one just scares the pants off of me. Pretend it's being recorded.
Kind of like if Jesus is in the room with you, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, in the beginning, we, with the prayer, invite him in, and we know he hears everything, but pretend somebody else is going to hear it,
Yeah.
and maybe they get to referee and choose sides of who the winner is. So you have to record your whole argument and let them hear everything, the tone of voice, the
Mhm.
accusations, and have you ever been in a little tiff? Maybe when you're out somewhere and then somebody walks around the corner and you didn't realize that they were there. And then all of a sudden you can just feel your cheeks get hot because you did not make yourself look good in this little interaction, and
Mhm.
maybe they hadn't seen that side of you before and you're busted.
Yeah.
And there have been times when I've had a doozy of an argument with Neil and I thought, if somebody recorded this
Yeah.
thing, I would be mortified just at how I'm talking to him what I'm saying, reason just flies out the window and I'm just like, well, so that's my final one is pretend it's being recorded and other people are listening
Incidentally.
in.
Yeah. Did you
And
go
how
ahead?
would you want to be perceived? How would you comport yourself? It's that whole thing about when your small children are around,
Yeah.
you might talk a little sweeter and a little kinder even when you're upset to your spouse because you don't want them to witness anything ugly. So
Yeah.
that's what I've
Did you
got.
see the president of France? Did you see what happened with him this week?
Mm.
So I don't know where he was landing, but he was still on his plane. The cameras were focused into the plane, and you can tell he's talking to someone. All of a sudden, his wife's hand comes out and just shoves him in the face. And he turns and sees that the door of the plane is open, and his face is like, hello, and he waves, and then he goes and walks back towards his wife. And of course, now they're trying to downplay it. Oh, they were playing, they were just being silly, whatever. But when you said that, it made me think, what if people saw what we look like? And not that we should be only motivated by that, but we should be, um, it should be a serious consideration of that we should be the person that we want others to think we are.
Yeah,
Because
well, that's not going to happen. And I don't think it should be a motivation, but just as a tool, as a mirror,
yes, yeah.
it helps you be more aware of how you look. You mentioned what your face is saying,
Mhm.
how I'm looking at him, the tone of my voice, the words that I'm using.
Yeah,
If I thought that somebody else was privy to all of that, I guarantee you it'd
yeah,
look a lot different. So
yeah.
it just helps us be more aware of how we're talking to our husbands.
Well, it turns a mirror on us, and it also makes us, well, it should make us look into the mirror of his word and realize that we're not
Yeah.
who we need to be. But it's just funny when you said that, I thought about they got busted. That
Yes.
was,
Ugh.
yeah. But I was thinking too, while you were talking, that all of these things, it doesn't have to do with just marriage. This is something that any kind of conflict, in a work conflict, or when you feel it coming on in work, or a friendship, or with, family members. I think it's always good to think about those things, the things that you brought up, thinking about praying before we go into a big family gathering where we know that there's going to be some conflict, or what is it that I am bringing into this relationship or bringing into this work scenario that I need to work on first before I get upset about. So I think these tips are not just relevant to marriage, but to any kind of oncoming conflict. So
And you know what I don't get? It's one of those scenarios where what do you have to lose by handling it the right way? You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. I mean,
exactly.
it's better for your own heart and peace of mind, like that quote you shared in the beginning. It's better for your relationship. It's better for the people who see you, like your children who are seeing how you handle conflict and learning from that. I mean, the only outcome of it, that whole list of things is all good.
Yeah.
What's it cost you? Swallow your pride, be mature,
It's
humble
hard.
yourself. I mean, that's hard, but when you consider how beneficial it is, why wouldn't we do that in the first place? Why are we shooting ourselves in the foot by handling conflict in a very fleshly, proud way?
Yeah. Well, it's like you said last week. I wonder if the enemy is involved in that. Anything that he can do to keep us separated is something that he wants to do.
Yeah.
So hopefully it was a really good day for me that day, just to, and again, I don't mean that in a patting myself on the back way, but in a like, oh,
Hmm.
what in the world? Why have I not done this before? And I
Hmm.
guess in some ways I have, but it was just really eye-opening for me to sit down and think about it and what made a difference. So hopefully it'll help
Well,
other
good job to you. That's hard. It really is hard. And I know what you're saying. You're not patting yourself on the back. It's almost like a revelation.
embarrassing. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually tried this and it actually worked. But it is hard, especially when you're having to reconsider and be humble and all those things that go against what we naturally want to do.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of you for doing that, and I'm inspired to do better about it myself.
Well, thanks. Good.
Thank you.
You have anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Got something good for me?
Do. Um, so you mentioned Shannon Ketchum.
Mhm. Yeah.
My something good for you is something from her husband Brian, Brian's mom.
Okay.
So Elisa Ketchum has written a children's book. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
I found out about it at Equipped when I was talking to her, and it's a cute little, I wish I had a copy to show you, but I ordered 3 copies as soon as I found out, and I've already given it to our 3 kids for their kids. But it's called From Ants to Zebras, and it's a cute little, like it's an alphabet poem using little animals, and it's bright and cheerful and fun. And some of the animals are kind of, ordinary animals, but a lot of them are like a newt,
Hmm.
or more unusual type animals. But it's really cute. And she doesn't have a website, but you can find it on Amazon. And Elisa Ketchum, her first name is spelled Alica. So it's like Alicia without the second I, but it's Elisa Ketchum, Ketchem.
Yeah.
And the book is From Ants to Zebras. And it was
Well,
published last October.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
looking at it
cute.
here on Amazon.
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
that's fun. Okay. There's only one left in stock, so
Uh-oh.
I'll grab that before it's gone. Thanks. I'm glad to know about that.
Mhm.
Mine is just an idea, and it's wallpaper. I never thought I would be recommending wallpaper because I've taken enough wallpaper down off of walls,
Mhm.
but now they have wallpaper that is like peel and stick. And it's
Mhm.
still not like it's not like a post-it note peel and stick, but you can readjust it much easier than the old stuff. So not I don't necessarily like the whole room wallpapered, although I'm seeing more of that on, Pinterest or whatever. But just a small accent wall. And I put it in the back of these bookshelves behind the shelves, and I love it. It's just a pop of color in there. But I also know that I can take it off at some point if I get tired of it and paint or stain or whatever. And then in the pantry, we put one small wall with wallpaper, the peel and stick kind, and it's just fun and it's colorful and it's like it's not a such a commitment like a whole room where
Mhm.
you're like, oh, it's a little overwhelming to me. So just an idea to think of if you're looking for some little refresher. Like
Yeah.
even, I'm not suggesting this, but that wall behind you, I'm talking about something that size that's just what,
Yeah.
2 feet wide and maybe 5 feet tall. Of course,
Mhm.
it goes down further, but it's just kind of like art on your wall because they make some really cool ones. The one that I can remember off the top of my head is a company called Loomwell, but I had sent off for a bunch of samples from different places, so I know there's more than one, but Loomwell is one. Just a fun idea for,
You'll have to share a picture of the one you put in your pantry.
okay, I will. All
Oh,
right,
neat.
fun stuff.
Mhm.
Well, as always, it is good to work through things. I feel like I process things and now I mean, we already resolved whatever it was that happened on Saturday, but I even feel better about going in there now and saying, okay, I feel all better now. From now on, I'm not ever gonna be sassy or ugly or any of those other bad things. No more sarcasm. Yeah, I'm sure it will happen
Not
again.
gonna be sassy.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to be better. I am. So
And
thanks for
I
your wisdom.
apologize for the interruption. I told you on the front end that Ollie has an injury of some sort that has
Mm.
been gotten progressively worse. And I had texted Neil before we started recording to ask him if he could get him into a vet. We've been having a hard time with that. And he said something about the timing of it all. And I said, well, I'll be, if you do get him in today, it won't be anytime soon and I'll be done recording. Well, apparently he did get him in and it needed to
Awesome.
be soon. And so he came by, that was him at the door. He came by and just swooped Ollie up and walked out. So
Oh,
apparently
he
he
had an
was able to
appointment.
get him into a vet and get an appointment. So,
I
but
was hoping
sorry
that's
for the
why.
interruption there. Just
No,
stepped away from the podcast.
I wanted to ask you, but I didn't want to ask you, but I'm so glad. I was hoping that that was an appointment for the vet to take him.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Well, let me
Yeah.
know.
I will.
All right. Well, I love you and I appreciate you. I'm thankful for your friendship and how you help me be a better person.
Well, I definitely learned from you today, and I'm not kidding. I took notes. I need to write them on my hand. Next time conflict comes up, hold on a second.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
Let
Step
us
one,
pray.
let me know how that goes for you.
Okay.
All right. Well, until next time.
Keep looking up.
All right. Have a good week.